Hello and welcome back, everyone, to episode 3 of our short form limited series podcast, Ambassadors of Harmony Travel Memories. I am your humble host, Jill Tokac. I am the Marketing and Recruitment Manager here at BCC, and today I am joined by a BCC alumni who's going to introduce herself. Go on ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jess Dalrymple, and I was in BCC from 2012 to 2016, so 4 years.
So, get us started with a little bit of how did you find out about BCC? Did you audition for it? Anything like that?
Yeah, so I found out about BCC when I was in eighth grade. It was right at the end of my eighth grade year. My chorus teacher, I was in chorus at my middle school, and she had announcements that she would post on the projector every day, and usually in the top right corner she would have an announcement about local choirs that were hosting auditions. And so one day I walked in and I saw that BCC was scheduling their annual auditions, and one of my best friends from middle school actually was in BCC at the time, and she encouraged me to audition. So then I went home that day and I said to my mom, I want to audition for BCC. So she scheduled an audition for like a Friday afternoon. So then I went into Boston and I auditioned for I believe it was Mr. Martha Reynolds. And so I was in the Central Intermediate Advanced Choir for 1 year when I was in ninth grade. And actually, that was the first year that CIA was in existence. So I was part of like the very first CIA. And then um, after that, I was in concert choir. And then for my final 2 years of BCC, I was in the premier choir.
Okay, you're actually the second person that I've spoken to who joined at around middle school age. Normally, what we hear is grade school or you join in high school.
Yeah.
Um, and I also think what you've just spoken about with your teacher is such a great idea, especially if you're someone who's working in the music world, to start off your week with, like, hey, I've heard of these things if you want to do stuff outside of
Mhm.
school. Very
And
smart.
I've done that as a music teacher myself. I live in Connecticut now. Um, so I've announced like, oh, in Hartford there's a children's choir, that's looking for people to audition. In this city there's a community choir opening up for, this age group. So I try to also now give back to the choral community in that way. So
I love that. And
thanks.
then just a fun thing to add here. Why don't you tell us what your job is now that you've graduated
Sure.
BCC? What do you do?
So I am a middle school choir and general music teacher. So I have three grade level choruses. So I have a sixth grade chorus, seventh grade chorus, and eighth grade chorus. I also have an auditioned choir, and that meets about once a week after school. And then I also teach all of the students in the school that take general music in sixth grade and eighth grade specifically. Another music teacher in the building teaches the seventh grade music course, but I get to know pretty much all of the students over their 3 years in middle school, which is amazing. So,
That is amazing. And that's one of our favorite things too at BCC is seeing people graduate and then continue in
yep.
music education. So moving on to your time in the choir, was tour something that was at all spoken about? Was this something that you were looking forward to while being part of BCC?
It was definitely something that I was looking forward to. I think the first time I heard about there being a tour was, I think, literally my first day of Premier Choir. Um, Concert Choir did, like, I don't know if I would call it a tour, but they did. We went up to Portland, Maine, and we were there for a couple of nights. So it was a little bit of like a taste of tour, I guess. Um, but as far as international tours, I didn't hear anything about that until my first rehearsal. And of course, I was extremely excited at the opportunity of getting to travel internationally and perform with Premier Choir like in my first year. Like I was so excited about that.
So from there, you are in a rehearsal or wherever you are, and it's announced that you guys are going on tour, and it was announced to you that you're going to both Berlin and Prague. What was your reaction to that?
Um, I was excited because I had never been to either of those European cities. I was lucky enough to the summer before starting as a member of PC. I had traveled to Paris, France, and that was really my first time going to Europe. So um, to be able to go to Europe, again, was amazing, and to be able to explore not only a new part of Europe because I was in Western Europe before, and then I was going to be more in Eastern Europe, especially with Prague, and getting to explore two major European cities. I was really excited about that.
And I think that kind of answers a little bit of our next question, which was like, what was it like leaving the United States? Had you ever done it while you were in high school? So were you someone who came from a family that traveled a bunch? Had you been to other places besides Europe, or was it primarily Europe for you?
Primarily, we had traveled, sort of around the United States, and then when I was in high school, then we started traveling a little bit more internationally. And Europe was like the first like big trip. France was the first big trip that we took as a family. So
That's cool. So you get to go to France and then you get to move over a little bit. You go to
mhm,
Berlin and Prague, but
yeah.
for different reasons. So then from there, talk a little bit about what the training was like getting yourself ready for tour. Was the teaching any different from your normal MLK concert? Was it a little bit more intensive?
Oh man, it was so long ago. Um, I remember it being intense when we were preparing for both Martin Luther King and the tour at the same time because it was in celebration of, I believe it was like the 70th anniversary of the liberation of all the Holocaust camps. Dr. TK definitely, emphasized that a lot. We started rehearsing music for tour right from the get go. And I remember there were a couple of Saturday rehearsals that he scheduled, to have some extra time with the repertoire, and some of the composers that commissioned original pieces for the tour came and met with us. There was one Saturday I remember where we had, I think, one or maybe two Holocaust survivors come in and talk to us, which was extremely moving and emotional for me. I remember I was like crying, after hearing their story. Um, so yeah, I would say it was definitely like emotionally intense at times. And we worked very hard to prepare, but that work was all very worthwhile.
Then you had already been to Europe before, but this is different. This is a different part of Europe. So
Yes.
you have a little bit of knowledge that maybe some other students who had never left the United States had been through before. So what was your first reaction? Because I believe you went to Prague first.
Yes.
What did it feel like to land there? What was that like your first night?
The first night I remember was fantastic. I remember when we left the airport, I think the first thing I noticed about the city was the architecture. Um, it wasn't like an American city, and it wasn't really like a super modern city. I loved how colorful the buildings were. Um, a lot of them I think were built from like clay. I want to say the roofs were stunning. The views from pretty much anywhere in the city were gorgeous, and Berlin was nice too. But Berlin reminded me a little bit more of like a modern day city, and it had more similarities to cities that I had been to in the United States. But I just remember myself, and I think pretty much everybody on the tour just was reveling in how beautiful Prague was, when we went there the first time. So when we stepped out of the airport and into the city for the very first time. I remember there was one concert that we did. I remember it was an outdoor venue, and I believe we were joined by a school choir based in Prague, or maybe like a suburb, I guess, outside of the city. And we got to sit in on their rehearsal, and hear them perform, and then they got to hear us, which was great. And they sang a spiritual, which was really cool, to hear them do that. I remember, I think at least one of the commissioned pieces, was in a foreign language. I don't remember if it was German or if it was Hebrew. Um, but I do remember that not everything that we sang was in English. We definitely sang in multiple languages. And then there was one concert I remember. I believe it was actually the final concert of the tour. We performed in an indoor venue in Berlin. I don't remember exactly what type of building it was, but it was not air conditioned. It was very hot in there, and I remember most of us, I think, performed barefoot, because Dr. TK wanted us to be a little bit more grounded. Um, so I think most of us like just took off our shoes, like, because that's, I don't know, that's what we did. But I remember performing that concert barefoot and thinking, man, I've never done this before. Like, this is new, this is interesting, and it was cool. I look back on that very fondly.
I don't know if I've seen many choirs perform barefoot as well.
Yeah.
That is
That's the
interesting.
only time I think that I've performed truly barefoot. I think I've performed other concerts where I've taken my shoes off, but I've had, socks on, but like I was truly barefoot that night. So, yeah.
Wow.
So,
That also must have helped a little bit with cooling down, I would say. Sometimes when I take my shoes off, I feel a little bit better in the heat.
mhm.
Um,
Had our hair up. Thankfully, our
yeah.
polos were, short sleeves, so that helped too. But we all had to wear long pants. Like, we had to look, pretty uniform. So yeah, and there
Mm.
were a lot of people at the concert too, which didn't really help with, um, like, keeping things cool. But yeah, so
Oh my goodness.
still
That sounds
still a really great performance though. So
exactly. And that's what I've heard is that the magic wasn't lost, that it still was magical. It's just hot,
yeah,
which leads me to a little bit of while you were there, besides the singing, do you have any sort of like fun anecdotes of maybe something you did or something that you remembered while being on tour?
I remember having a lot of fun, at the meals, um, sharing a lot of laughs, with friends, um, hanging out in the hotels. Um, there were some fun memories, with that, when we all got to kind of, you know, after a long day of, rehearsals or walking around the city, like going back to the hotel, and relaxing and just being able to, spend time, with one another. I remember that a lot.
We were talking about how at BCC, especially if you go on tour and you are someone who does premier choirs, you are made into two things, an ambassador of harmony and a global citizen. An ambassador of harmony is someone who takes the teachings of BCC and uses them to connect others through song. And then a global citizen is someone who has been out in the world and realizes that they are one of many, many, many people and realizes that like we're all different yet connected somehow. The way that we've been described is kind of like a drop in the water.
Mhm.
You realize that you are kind of like that. And it can be kind of overwhelming, but at the same time, very exciting. So, if you could give us an answer to the first question about an ambassador of harmony, how do you think this tour made you into one of those?
I mean, as a music teacher myself now, I would like to think, and especially being, a choral educator now, I would like to think that I meet the, criteria, for being an ambassador of harmony. I have certainly taken, everything that I have learned, from BCC, with me. I took it with me to my college. I took it with me, at the different, schools that I've taught at, because when I was in BCC, I got to meet, so many great people from so many, diverse backgrounds. So I'm really grateful, for that. And then I've taught in, a variety of, communities. I've taught in affluent communities. I've taught in, Title I communities where there are, several families that are living, in poverty, unfortunately. So I've definitely taken the teachings, to my work now, and I've, tried to, impart them, onto my students. I certainly like definitely realize that I am, just one person in a very large world, and I am very passionate about, learning about, music and other cultures, and I try to, bring that into my classroom with the repertoire that I choose. I remember it was last school year actually, for my, I believe it was my winter concert. I had all of the choirs do one song that was, holiday themed, because it was a winter concert, and then they all sang at least one song, in a foreign language as well. And I tried to pick a different culture for each foreign language piece. So there was, one choir that did a Hanukkah song. So they learned about, Jewish traditions. And then there was another choir that did a Spanish song. And then there was another song that was in Swahili. So I try really hard to, bring repertoire that exposes my students to cultures that are different from their own, so that they can also broaden their worldview. Because I think that's important. As much as my students love, pop music that they hear on the radio, it's important for them to be exposed and to learn about, other facets of choral music. And I know that I have become a better global citizen and a better musician by learning about other cultures, by performing music, from other cultures. And I plan to continue learning that music myself, and then, bringing it to my students to broaden their worldviews and expand their horizons.
Was BCC a part of the inspiration that you had to do that as well? Did it help with sort of solidifying you wanted to be a music teacher too?
I think so, yes. And their whole mission with, social justice, I'm very passionate about that. It's a big part of my teaching philosophy. um, I've written about it in several undergraduate and graduate papers that I, had to complete during my post-secondary education journey. So yeah, BCC was a huge part of developing my teaching philosophy and my music philosophy in general. So
So now to wrap this all up, why do you think people should support BCC as we go on tours? Because we're going to Puerto Rico. We're actually very close to going. We're going to be
very
there in a
close.
few days.
Awesome.
Crazy. So, and we've been going is the thing. We haven't stopped. We've been going every couple of years or every year. And we have a tour that we're going to be announcing soon on top of Puerto Rico for next year, which is very exciting.
That is very exciting.
Um, so you just wait until it gets out. But why don't you give us a little bit of why should people support us then?
I think that people should, support the Boston Children's Chorus, bringing their, choirs within the organization on these tours, because it allows students from all different backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, financial backgrounds. It gives them these opportunities that they might not have otherwise. And I think it's so important for these tours to happen. And they can't really happen without, support from the community. I remember when we were preparing for the tour to Prague and Berlin, there was a Kickstarter campaign that was started, and I believe the statistic that was being shared was that the Boston Children's Chorus organization uh, was only able to cover the costs really of like the tuition of everybody in the choir, only covered about 56% of the costs of the entire tour, for travel, accommodations, etc. So we were really, really reliant, on support, from the greater Boston community to make the tour possible. And thankfully, we met our, campaign goal, which we would not have done um, without the support from the community. So if we want to continue providing these opportunities to any child, that is given them, in BCC, it's these tours are essential, to not only like these students' musical development, but in broadening, their worldview, expanding their horizons to learn about, other cultures and to be able to see the world. Um, it's important to their development, as people, and as global citizens. So if if the people are able to, support BCC as they, prepare for these tours year after year, they absolutely should. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but no donation is too small, right? So if there's any way that people can give back to be able to support these tours. I know as an alum, I've donated some money to BCC just because of the impact that my participation in BCC has had on me as I have grown into an adult who is still very involved with music. It's how I make my living. And I don't think I would have ever pursued that if it weren't for my involvement with BCC and the experiences that I had while being a part of that organization.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That honestly, that encompasses a lot, which is, I mean, exactly what we're looking for, right? Like when we do anything at BCC, honestly, we hope that you do it because you want to have fun and also because you enjoy singing, and that hopefully this develops a bit of your social inquiry and that you stay here and become an ambassador of harmony for us, and then eventually a global citizen out here in the world. And if you like music more, to become an educator or an artist in some way,
Yeah.
that's that is the best thing that we can hear. So it was just so lovely to meet you and talk with you today.
Lovely to meet you too. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about my experiences.
Of course. Well, that's all, folks. This is the end of episode 3, Ambassadors of Harmony, Travel Memories. I've been your humble host, Jill Tokac, and I hope you have a wonderful day.